Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. I think I know many of you. Just a quick, brief introduction of myself, and then at the end of my remarks, we'll introduce our next speaker, Laurel Gunsel from the University of St. Thomas. Father Dan Griffith, I'm pastor here at the Basilica. I also direct an initiative on restorative justice and healing at the St. Thomas Law School. And I'm also serving as the Archdiocesan Liaison for Restorative Justice and Healing. And so we'll do, occasionally facilitate a restorative process here in the Archdiocese. I want to thank my colleague Janice Anderson, who also does that from time to time as well. So really happy that you're here. If one person came who wanted to talk about their own processing of the grief and trauma that they have been through, it would be worth it, right? That's what we do. We accompany one another. Jesus desires healing. I'm going to be coming at my remarks from at least grounded in the Catholic spiritual and intellectual tradition. And, in a minute I'll introduce Laurel, but really happy that she's here. She speaks with our law students. She's one of our presenters in the course. I teach a course on restorative justice, law, and healing that is part of our curriculum. I taught that for many years with Hank Shea, who is here, and I thank Hank for really promoting this through the channels and also raising this as an important thing to do, and I really believe it is. To gather and to help accompany one another and to process what we've been through. I also want to thank Isabel Peters, who is doing our recording. Izzy is my assistant both here at the Basilica and also at the law school, and is the restorative justice coordinator. So I thank Izzy for all that she does. I think our colleague Julie Craven would be here tonight, but she has a significant birthday that she's celebrating. So we wish Julie well on her birthday. Why don't we begin in prayer, and we'll ask the Lord to be with us here. Loving God, we thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for the gift of your Son, Jesus. We thank you for the gift of healing, to which you call all your children. Allow this to be a night rooted in faith, but also inspired and guided by your Spirit. May we be instruments of healing, instruments of justice and peace in our world. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. If you are outside of not a member of the Basilica community, you are really very welcome here. We open our doors to everyone. I did mention this session in an opinion piece that was published in the Star Tribune a couple of weeks ago. So everyone is very welcome here tonight. I want to do just a few minutes on restorative justice. So what we're doing tonight is a restorative justice and healing session. It would be considered a restorative practice to talk about trauma, to talk about what we've been through, to name the harm, and then to have Laurel talk about the nature of trauma and healing, and then move into circles, which we're going to do in the second half of the evening. Just to give you a lineup of what we're going to do, I'll speak for about 15 minutes. Laurel will speak for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then we'll enter into circles, and we'll come back for just a few minutes at the end. We found that people like to come back as they're processing their experience. So that will be this evening. We will end the circles about 5 to 7, somewhere in there. If somebody's in the middle of a sharing, you can certainly, we're not going to cut you off. That would not be very restorative. So we're not going to do that. So what is restorative justice? What's the elevator speech, if you will? It's a philosophical and practical approach to harm that includes multiple stakeholders in furtherance of accountability and healing. That's the definition that Julie and Brandon Mickelson and I, we have a law review article that's being published later this fall, and we tried to combine a number of different definitions to come up with that one, because it really is inclusive of different approaches. So welcome, everybody. So it's both philosophical and practical, right? The practical part is you're trying to respond to healing. You're trying to respond to the harm. It's a worldwide movement. It was rooted first in the indigenous practices of First Nation peoples in North America, New Zealand, and also seen in pre-colonial Africa. So what you have is reason is universal. So you can have similar approaches to responding to harm in multiple cultures historically, and that's what we saw with restorative justice. Why is it a worldwide movement? Well, it began in the 1970s. It was really historically rooted in the indigenous practices. But in the 1970s in Canada, some clever, kind of creative, I assume it was a prosecutor, decided to use a restorative process to respond to a property crime. And what happened is it was very, very effective. One of the reasons it's become a worldwide movement is because restorative justice is very effective at responding to harm in ways that traditional kind of punitive responses often can't be. Plus, it centers the survivor. It's really primarily oriented to what the survivor needs. What are the needs, and then what are our corresponding obligations? So one of the things I tell my law students is, one of the reasons why it became a worldwide movement is that it's consistent with our human nature, which seeks healing and restoration. It is inclusive of multiple stakeholders. It's highly adaptable. So you can use restorative justice in very different ways, in a way that can be creative and adaptable across multiple professions and disciplines. I was a skeptic. When I first heard about restorative justice, I thought, it sounds fuzzy, ethereal, new age. And I remember I was having dinner with Hank Shea, I think in 2016 or 17, and he introduced me to Janine Geske, who left the Wisconsin Supreme Court to do restorative justice work. She was so moved by the experience she had in the Green Bay Maximum Correctional Facility that she, at the height of her legal career, left to do restorative justice. And it was the storytelling. We had been through, an awful experience here in the Archdiocese, really an implosion. And we were on the harm side, meaning that we were having to respond. I was reading files, and it was really, really hard work. But it paled in compared to the direct trauma that was being experienced by survivors. And so in hearing those stories, that's what captured my heart. And I'm like, I want to be part of the healing side of this ministry in terms of the Archdiocese. So it was a gift to be able to do this work and to discern that with Archbishop Hebda. And then Hank and I proposed an initiative to Rob Vischer at the St. Thomas Law School. He's now president of the university and very much a proponent. And so to see law students now, 24, our classes are full every semester, it's a source of hope for them. They go to Stillwater Correctional Facility, and they're in a Restorative Justice 101 group with the incarcerated men who are leading it. And it's a source of hope for them, because now they see law students who are going to think creatively, is there another way? Sometimes it can be an adjunct or a supplement to the criminal system that can help respond to harm, particularly one that centers the survivor. So it's really been an interesting journey, and I've gone from skeptic to big proponent, because I've seen restorative justice work over and over and over. I am really thankful to Janice and a number of the folks here from the Basilica who have really embraced restorative justice at the Basilica. We've done a number of these circles. We'll do another one coming up in December. We have a program on divorced Catholics and what they've experienced. And so we're going to have an opportunity for folks to tell their story, and then we'll enter into circles. Sometimes we respond to conflict. You know, conflict does happen in a parish from time to time. Conflict in a way that can be restored, where somebody can tell their story and are able to repair the harm to relationships. So I'm really proud of the Basilica community. I'm not surprised that the Basilica community and staff have really embraced restorative justice, and we want to be a restorative parish. We've been through a lot in the Twin Cities, and I want to just offer a trigger warning here as I talk about this. You may feel it in your body, and Laurel's going to talk more about that. And just a quick story, in 2000, and I believe it was 15 or maybe 2014, we were down in Rochester for the biennial priest gathering. And there was an article that was going to come out from the Minnesota Public Radio. It was an investigative article on the investigation of the former archbishop. And I knew that it was going to be published, and it was a very tense time. And just after that, the 2 years later is when Archbishop Nienstedt resigned, and that also took place in Rochester. Then 2 years after that, we had Archbishop Hebda was there, and now Bishop Don DeGrood, who's in Sioux Falls, and we were on a panel. And I equated that gathering of priests, and Laurel won't be surprised by this because this is a work she does, and that location as a source of harm, a place of harm. So Don as well, Bishop Don DeGrood, he was the vicar for priests. Neither of us wanted to be on this panel. I got flushed in the face. My heart started to beat because I was all that stuff the last 4 years that had occurred was coming back. Well, that's trauma. That's secondary trauma, but some of it was direct in terms of really how involved I was in that work. Don, the same thing. I remember my buddies going, Griffith, you normally don't, you did not want to be there. Well, that's secondary trauma. Yeah, I couldn't name it at that point. I just knew that I was being affected. Look at what the Twin Cities community has been through. And I think of the folks who have experienced direct trauma, the folks at Annunciation, the families, the children, the families who lost their dear children. I think of what they've been through. And so we always talk about secondary trauma, but we talk first about that direct and primary trauma. So that occurred, the horrible shooting on the 27th, was it the 27th of August? We had the Hortman killing earlier that summer. On the 25th of May, which happens to be my ordination date, we had the 5th anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. The Twin Cities have been a ground zero place for school shooting, political violence, and racialized, in my opinion, racialized violence, and killing in all of those cases. We're struggling. This is part of what I talked about in my opinion piece. We are struggling, and what we hear is trauma that is not processed is dispersed. If it's not processed and healed, it has negative ripple effects. And so I think we have to and I'm just about done here. The main part of the program is Laurel, so I want to get to that. One of the things, though, in the midst of the trauma in the Twin Cities have been extraordinary stories of light. The stories coming out of Annunciation, of the way the community has come together, the nightly rosaries, It has been really, really inspiring. I said at the Blue Mass that Archbishop Hebda and Father Zarin have been extraordinary shepherds and accompanying folks in their grief. One of the most joyful moments I think I'll ever remember is watching the news reports of Sophia, and how do you pronounce her last name? Forkas, the young girl who was, wounded in the head, and watching her come out of the hospital and then drive to be with her fellow students. So a lot of light in the darkness that has been inspiring. What I hope we don't do is give in to the temptation, and you're here, so you're not doing that. Give in to the temptation to want to look away or sweep the harm under the rug. That, I think it might be part of our brokenness, our original sin. It can be a dysfunction to say, nope, I'm not going to deal with it. And I think we have to overcome that temptation to do that. God desires healing, right? My classmate said in a blog piece, who was on our initiative board, that just as the physical body is oriented to healing, like when we break a bone, those bones mend, so too spiritually and emotionally, when we are wounded, we also desire flourishing and healing. But we have to be attentive to that. The bones just mend, they mend. But we have to be more intentional on the emotional side to really invite that healing. I'm loving what I'm hearing from our new Pope, the importance of unity, coming together, compassion, peace, and I think we can help heal each other. And this evening is an opportunity to do that. Tonight is not about politics or policy. That is important. The Catholic Church has a role to play in that, in seeking to build a more just and humane social order. But that's really not what we're doing this evening. It's really helping to process the grief. Now, the political dimension can also be a source of deep grief for people. And so we don't want to say there's certain topics out about. No, I'm not proposing that at all. But to say primarily what this evening is about is coming together to help invite healing and processing of our grief. So, without further ado, and I hope I didn't take too much of her time here, again, thank you for your presence here. I'm really hopeful that this can be an opportunity to experience healing. What we'll do is, after Laurel's presentation, we'll come back, and there's some specific questions that folks are going to take up in the healing circles. And I thank members of our Basilica community who are serving as circle keepers. Laurel Gunsel is a counselor at the University of St. Thomas on the Minneapolis campus, and has earned her MA, her Master's in Counseling Psychology from St. Mary's University. She also holds a Master of Divinity, I had forgotten that, from Union Theological Seminary in New York City, with a concentration in feminist theology and ritual. Laurel is a licensed professional clinical counselor. She uses a transpersonal, developmental, multicultural, and mindfulness-based approach. I have been so inspired in seeing her present to our law students, and I know that she also provides counseling on the Minneapolis campus, including to some of our law students, but probably staff and faculty colleagues. Of course, she's not going to confirm that, but she is a very gifted person. One of the things that always stands out to me when I'm inviting, speakers, I think of our own Father Joe, who's off the charts in this regard, is you can have all the degrees and all of the wisdom in the world, but if you don't have humanity, right, that's the key. And Laurel has wonderful humanity, and it's a real gift. And paired with her great training and great skills, it's brought that combination has brought healing to a lot of folks. So please welcome Laurel Gunsel.
looks like it's warming up. Well, thank you. I'm really grateful to be here, grateful to Father Dan for the invitation. It feels like a, kindred spirit in the sense of humanity and his trauma-informed approach to justice in the legal system, which I think is much needed in the law school. I do see a lot of law students. I don't actually see faculty and staff. I only see the students, just so you know. That are often coming in with, having to read criminal law, family law cases, this kind of graphic detail, and then it churns up their own personal histories, and it's one of those fields that people go into a lot of times because there's some personal pain related to that. Okay, let me try to push the right button here. There we go. Yay, okay, thanks. Okay. And now how do I finish it? Okay. So just to kind of begin with a definition of trauma, this one is a good one because I like that it talks about all of the dimensions where trauma impacts us. An event, a series of events or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual is physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening and has lasting adverse experiences or adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And that spiritual dimension, and as you were talking about the story circles, I'm not Catholic myself, I come from the Quaker tradition, and the idea that there is that of God, there's the light of God in every person, every single one of us has something to share and contribute to the discussion. Seems like something that's going to be played out here. Father Dan mentioned secondary or vicarious trauma, and that's what happens when we are so close, maybe as a caretaker or service worker. And sometimes in this case, so I specialize, to the extent that I specialize in anything, in trauma and complex trauma. And we often think of complex trauma as, one of those big T traumas like an assault or combat, sometimes medical trauma in the context of developmental trauma or some other small ongoing harms that have happened repeatedly over the years. And it seems to me, kind of as Father Dan was setting it up, that we're in this period of collective complex trauma. There's so much happening in the political landscape, and then these horrific and grotesque, violent acts that we're having right here in the community, and that many of us are maybe one degree of separation from, if any. So I think the question I want to invite us to explore tonight is, and this is both a spiritual question and a mental health question, is how do we find our moorings when this instability is all around us? I mean, it can be so dizzying. I remember this kind of awful day. This is a little embarrassing, but I'll share, I think it was after work, and I was just scrolling on my phone, and, social media just gives you one unrelated thing after the other. And there was this really awful and disturbing image from Gaza that just especially shook me. And I kind of felt that for a minute, and then I scrolled, and the next one was here's a discount at this spa. And I was like, oh, that sounds nice. And I was so disgusted with myself because I just wanted to get out of that horror. It was too hard I couldn't metabolize it at the time. And it's I don't even go to spas. But that was that I was trying to find I'm not gonna have any luck with this, to try to find our anchors and to try to find our moorings in times like this. And so sometimes when logic fails us because there's so much cognitive dissonance in this whole experience, it's helpful to focus on the nervous system. So I'm going to take us just through a little journey of the nervous system here and invite you to reflect on your own. And if I can ever get my thing to work. Seems like it might be coming. Okay, thanks. Yes, that's my husband. He's great IT help. Yeah. All right. The nervous, so it's not, in terms of like how we think about trauma, it's not the event that's traumatic, it's how your nervous system holds it. The nervous system decides what's traumatic. So our nervous systems have 3 different states, okay? I'm actually going to go ahead a little bit so you can see the ladder. As humans, the safe and connected state is what we are evolved to have capacity for and to need. We need a sense of belonging and connection. Many of us are probably familiar with the fight or flight state. This is when we feel very anxious, agitated, on edge. This is what happens, I've got a high schooler and I sometimes get a text that, well, the school had a shelter in place today, so that will activate my fight or flight, my kind of very anxious state. So the subtler ways that this happens is also interesting. So because our nervous systems are picking up signals all the time. So it can be somebody's body language as they're passing us on the sidewalk. It can be a loved one taking a certain tone of voice that we know is kind of danger. That puts us in that fight or flight state. And then the last one, and this is evolutionarily the oldest, is the freeze or collapse or shutdown state. So if you think about a lizard that is either its choices are to live its life, or if its life is threatened, it may play dead. And so this is called an autonomic hierarchy because when we are fully in our, kind of prefrontal cortex and able to engage in this, let me go back up now, in this ventral vagal safe and connected state, we actually have options for how to solve conflict, like negotiation or listening or to talk about it. We can find connection. We can use that uniquely human skill to work out these issues. But when our nervous systems get overwhelmed and we get in fight or flight or the freeze and dissociate state, this just goes offline. We just don't even have access to it. And so we end up, and we're more vulnerable to this if we've experienced a lot of trauma, to having less access to that safe and connected state. And that we have this exhausting experience of bouncing back and forth between the fight and flight state, that kind of activated arousal, and then the shutdown state. So the shutdown state is me scrolling on my phone and not being able to kind of take in and being, the spa seeming appealing. The kids these days talk about bed rot, like it's like you lay in bed and can't get up and you're on your phone. And that would be an example of that freeze state. So this is something, because the reason I wanted to bring this up is to just invite you to check in with yourself. So if you think about I want to actually end on this one. So if you think about what this mobilized fight or flight state is like for you, and you might don't think of something too distressing right now, but if you think about an incident where this might happen in your day-to-day life, what does that feel like in your body? Really just notice, tune in. For me, I get some pressure in my chest, my heart might race, my jaw starts to clench. What emotions go with it? What does your face look like? What muscles in your face get engaged? Because this is actually part of the autonomic nervous system. It connects to all of our facial muscles. That's why when you can tell if somebody's giving you a fake smile, it does not feel good. We are picking up on that. And also, what does your voice sound like? When we're in fight or flight, we're going to be in higher pitches. It's going to be more pressured. So all of these things are just connected in the nervous system, and this is happening all below the level of conscious awareness. And so it really takes some effort to tune into that and begin to notice and really befriend our states. We need these states. We don't want to be in that safe and connected state all the time because we need to be able to recognize threat and act accordingly. But to also notice, this was evolved so that if we're being chased by a tiger, we can run and get out of it. Or if a car, goes in front of us, cuts in front of us in traffic, that we slam on the brakes, and we need that activation to act quickly. But then how quickly can we get back into the state of safety and connection? And that's what gets compromised with trauma. Okay, so now think about what that freeze state is like for you. This is often a place of real shame because it's where we get into those avoidant behaviors, addictive behaviors, and this is when our nervous system has determined that this is so overwhelming that we don't have the resources to fight. We don't have the resources to run. We don't have the resources to act, and so we start to shut down. So for me, in this state, there's a real heaviness. My head gets foggy. It's hard to move through space. It's just a very slow state. And so just notice it, just think of a state where that's coming up for you. And just map that. I do this with my clients sometimes. We'll do a nervous system map, and we actually draw the ladder and what are the signs that you're in each state. So when you're in this state, what does your face look like? And what does your voice sound like? It might be more flat, more low, more monotone. And so we also pick this up from each other, and this is some of the other cues of safety and danger that we get from each other, is noticing those facial expressions, noticing the voice tone. And so finally, this is our favorite one, the safe and connected state. So this is where this is our social engagement system. This is what makes humans, and this came evolutionarily with mammals. We can feel a sense of calm, loving, playfulness, and ease. And we tend to trust the people around us or give them the benefit of the doubt. And when we're in this state, this is where our logical brain is more online, and we're able to tune in and make wise decisions. And actually, if we're in this state, even if there is a threat, we can notice those other signals in our body and have some wisdom and say, okay, yeah, this might remind me of this other experience that actually was dangerous, but here I am now and I'm safe. So there's this great term called neuroception. So this is our nervous system's automatic surveillance system. It is our nervous systems are constantly scanning the environment for cues of safety and danger all the time. And this is below the level of conscious awareness, and it's below the level of logic and morality. This is the cues that we are getting from our body all the time. And so this is when we might find that our voice is getting the low or high because we're getting a neuroception of danger. You might get a neuroception of danger if there's a stern email from your boss. There's an environment, if you're not a city person, you're probably all city people if you go to the Basilica. Have you noticed how city people sometimes feel uncomfortable in the country and country people feel uncomfortable in the city? So these neuroceptions of danger and safety are evolutionarily based to some degree, but also through your own personal experience. So for example, a police officer standing on the sidewalk, to some people that might be, I feel safe, there is a protector figure here, and to other people that that figure might be there might be a neuroception of danger. So we move back and forth up and down that ladder all the time on a daily and weekly basis. We need to be able to do that. And just like in other states of health, it's flexibility and resilience that is the marker of health. And so we want to be able to travel up and down the ladder, but can we get back to that ventral vagal safe and connected state? That's the thing. And the more stress we're under, the more trauma we've experienced, it's harder to access that safe and connected state. And this is something that is helpful to know, especially if we're dealing with crime or harm, that those are usually also people who are pretty traumatized, the people who commit those acts. And so having this sense and be able to understand what's happening can extend some compassion and humanity to that experience, even if there also needs to be accountability. So the last piece of nervous system fun fact is co-regulation. And so this is how what we pick up on cues from each other. And we can actually settle our nervous system state by being a regulated presence. So if you've ever been with a little kid that was upset and crying and you were able to be calm, you weren't triggered yourself, because that happens too, right? But you were able to be calm, and you could kind of hold them and look them kindly in the eyes and give them a hug. That is co-regulating with them, and that is how they learn to self-regulate, is through co-regulation. Nobody can self-regulate by themselves. We are communal people, and we have to learn how to regulate in community. So we can imagine that given the current context of the community here and the world generally, all of this stuff, you can imagine that our systems are getting overwhelmed a lot of the time, and this ends up leading to misattunement. When we're in those neuroceptions of danger, we misread cues, and we are more likely to be agitated, or more likely to get into a fight with our partner, or be snippy with somebody at work. We're more likely to withdraw and not see a bid or an invitation for connection from others because we're stuck in a place of danger. So how do we break this cycle and build resilience? Well, one of which is to build community and supportive relationships. So step one, nice job, we're here now. This can be a co-regulating experience in these circles. That's an example of a co-regulating experience. Another one, name it to tame it, right? So noticing what state you're in. We don't have to judge it. In fact, it's really not helpful to judge it. Oh, I shouldn't feel this way. So many people invalidate their own experiences. I don't have the right to feel so upset about this. It didn't happen to me. It happened to that person. We can name and really honor our experiences without necessarily getting stuck in, a narrative that kind of keeps us cycling or ruminating, but to really feel the somatic experience of emotions and allow those to process through. There's a great book called Burnout, and they name ways to complete the stress response cycle, because when our systems get filled with cortisol, with the adrenaline, that stress cycle, we actually need to metabolize it. So if we were, in prehistoric times and being chased by a bear, that would flood our systems, and then we would run, and we would burn all of that cortisol. And if we run back to our community and we get hugs, and they're we're so glad you're safe, then we get to regulate and complete that stress response cycle. But if you have to fight traffic every day on the way to work and get really upset, you're not necessarily getting that happening. If you're reading the news, if you just keep getting these disturbing headlines and images over and over, and your body just keeps releasing that cortisol, what's happening to it? It becomes health problems, it becomes irritability, it becomes mental health issues, it becomes addiction. So we have to complete that stress response cycle. I always tell my clients I am pro-crying. That is a way of releasing stress and metabolizing it. And I think our culture has done such a disservice to children and boys and men in particular to train them out of crying, because it's really robbing them of a very important nervous system resource. But it's not the only one, so that's good. Actually, laughing really hard is another one. So, watching a show that you love, or even better, like being with friends and telling funny stories or cracking jokes. Creative expression. So if you're a musician or an artist, these are all ways that you can actually complete the stress response cycle and make it a practice of daily maintenance, to check in with yourself and notice what you're holding and what can I do to complete that cycle. Yes, this is my trusty feelings wheel. So this is back to the name it to tame it thing. Sometimes I'll say to somebody, how are you feeling? And they'll say, well, I feel like I should go, I don't know. I feel like I should be studying harder. That's not a feeling. That's a thought. That's a judgment. The feeling might be guilt, or it might be shame or anxiety or sadness. So actually knowing your feelings words, and sometimes having this around, I just always have one of these in my office, and we have one at home too, so that we have access to those. These are readily available online. Google feelingswheel.com and you can find one. If you have a shutdown pattern that's troubling to you, if you get into that shutdown state, that to de-shame and gently begin to mobilize your system. So when we're stuck in that shutdown state, we actually have to get some of that fight or flight energy to actually move back up into, we have to get some activation to move back up into safety. So that's the kind of thing you might need the support of a therapist or other helper to help move through those cycles. But it's so important not to be so hard on ourselves about it, even if we see that they're harmful patterns. Shame is sort of contraindicated to actually healing. It keeps us stuck. Engage in meaning making and getting clear on your values. And so if we were to look back at this time in our lives at this particular time in history, from many years from now, how would I have wanted to show up? I sometimes think about the people I admire from, that were living in Europe in World War II and how they navigated that. Or the people who were enslaved in the United States and how they found their dignity and maintained connection at that time. How do we want to show up in this time now? It's okay, we're almost done. And so to getting clear on your values and how you want to show up even when it's really hard, and what support do you need to actually do that? Because often it's not that easy. We have to find some ways through it. And then lastly, to make a plan for action and refilling your cup. So there's the action plan, and then there's the restorative plan. So pick one or two causes that are really important to you, even if it feels like it's just a drop in the bucket given the whole scheme of things. That so much research shows that doing something, and especially if it involves social connection, can give us back our sense of agency and actually even rebalance our nervous systems because we're not feeling so helpless. But not feel like we have to always be in that state, because of course there's never enough we could possibly do. There's nothing that's commensurate to all the things that are happening. So we have to restore and refill our cups through spiritual practice, through rest, through friendship. So that is, let's see, I think that was all. Oh, there was one more slide I wanted to show. Okay. I thought this was a beautiful quote. I see grief as a sharpener of our senses and an enhancer of our ability to connect. I see it as an expander of our empathy and as an express elevator that brings us closer to the burning